In the shifting sands of the Negev desert, the patriarch Abraham saw his family grow far beyond the lines of Sarah and Hagar. After Sarah's death, Abraham married Keturah, a covenant wife whose descendants built the great incense trade kingdoms of the East. Yet, Roman councils and translation edits systematically suppressed her legacy to narrow your view of biblical history. Today, we restore the hidden chronicles of Keturah and the forgotten desert nations that were erased from your Bible. Let us trace the geographical coordinate of this forgotten family in the Negev desert. After the intense trials of Mount Moriah and the passing of Sarah in Hebron, Abraham found himself in a state of transition. He sought to secure the future of his household, not only by finding a wife for Isaac, but by establishing new covenant outposts along the trade routes of the Arabian Peninsula. The Negev, with its vast wilderness and sparse oases, served as the physical launchpad for these eastern expansions, providing a natural buffer zone between the promised land of Canaan and the nomadic territories of the east, where the caravans assembled. The harsh, arid climate of the Negev demanded physical resilience, forcing the household of Abraham to master water conservation and livestock logistics under extreme environmental conditions. Abraham saw the spiritual necessity of sealing these eastern coordinates. He took a wife named Keturah, establishing a third major branch of his lineage that was destined to inherit the vast merchant routes of the East. While later translations and the Roman imperial church councils erased this branch to simplify the covenant narrative, early Hebrew manuscripts preserve Keturah as a true covenant partner. Her 6 sons were not outcasts, but royal descendants sent forth with physical gifts to establish powerful, independent kingdoms that guarded the trade gates of the Red Sea, keeping the knowledge of the Creator alive in the eastern deserts, ensuring the physical and spiritual continuity of the Abrahamic line across the region. The physical journey of Abraham into the Negev was marked by divine encounters and strategic planning. By settling in this transitional geographic region, Abraham positioned his household to interact with the merchant routes of the south, establishing a gateway for the dissemination of covenant wisdom to the eastern tribes. Keturah's presence in this landscape was not minor. She was the physical anchor for the southern and eastern extensions of the promise, proving that the family of the patriarch was destined to cover the deserts with cities of righteousness, expanding the reach of the covenant altar beyond Canaan. To appreciate the structural layout of Abraham's extended house, we must conduct a deep textual analysis of the first 6 verses of Genesis chapter 25. The text states, "Then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Zimran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shuah." This genealogical record is followed by the mention of Jokshan's sons, Sheba and Dedan, and the descendants of Midian. In these few verses, the biblical timeline reveals the sudden birth of 6 powerful clans, whose territories would quickly stretch from the borders of Egypt to the Persian Gulf. Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts, and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived, eastward unto the east country. This geographic relocation was a strategic division separating the seed of the promise from the seed of the eastern expansion. This separation was not an act of rejection, but a calculated political and economic distribution that established the merchant borders of the covenant. Let us compare the legal and spiritual status of Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah. Sarah was the primary covenant wife, whose son Isaac was the legal heir to the land of Canaan. Hagar was the Egyptian handmaid, whose son Ishmael was sent into the wilderness of Paran, establishing a lineage of nomadic archers. Keturah, described in some later manuscripts as a concubine status, was married to Abraham in his old age, after the death of Sarah. The Hebrew term for concubine, pilegesh, does not denote a servant or an illegitimate partner. Rather, it represents a secondary wife, with legal rights and financial protections, though her sons did not inherit the primary territorial title of Canaan. Early translations, particularly the Greek Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate edited by Jerome, often translated pilegesh in a way that downgraded her status, attempting to minimize her lineage to maintain an exclusive theological focus on Isaac, which whitewashed the multi-ethnic complexity of Abraham's household, keeping the common believer reliant on a simplified version of history. This division of gifts was a physical and political power shift. Abraham possessed immense wealth in cattle, silver, gold, and trade agreements. When he sent Keturah's sons to the East Country, he did not send them empty-handed. He gave them gifts of silver, gold, and livestock, along with the knowledge of spice trade routes and desert survival. This wealth allowed the 6 sons to quickly establish merchant guilds and stone fortress cities along the trade arteries of Arabia, protecting their families from imperial conquests. This separation was necessary to prevent territorial conflicts between Isaac's descendants in Canaan and Keturah's sons in the east, ensuring that each branch could fulfill its specific geographic destiny under the covenant blessing, creating a lasting network of economic power that supported the ancient Near East. I want to share a reflection with you from where I stand on this journey. Understanding this division is not about choosing favorites among Abraham's sons. It is about recognizing the immense scale of the covenant family. When we study these genealogies, we realize that the modern church has presented a highly simplified, Eurocentric version of biblical history that ignores the Eastern nations. Reclaiming Keturah allows us to see the multi-ethnic reality of our heritage, breaking the mental walls of exclusive division. Study these names, search the scriptures, and let your mind expand beyond the narrow boundaries of traditional doctrine, finding the connections that run deep through our bloodlines, restoring the honor of the forgotten mothers of the covenant. The East Country, corresponding to modern northern Arabia, Jordan, and the Gulf regions, became the permanent home of these 6 clans. They adapted to the arid climate, mastering the hydrology of the desert and the cultivation of drought-resistant crops. Their caravans carried the wealth of India and Africa to the Mediterranean, establishing a network of commerce that connected the ancient world. By sending them eastward, Abraham positioned his sons at the crossroads of global trade, ensuring that his lineage would dominate the economic landscape of the ancient Near East, creating a lasting physical presence that survived the rise and fall of surrounding empires. This economic dominance was the direct result of Abraham's initial distribution of gifts, which functioned as seed capital for the desert kingdoms, building a physical platform of strength that preserved their independence. Furthermore, the gifts Abraham gave to Keturah's sons were not merely material wealth, but spiritual and technological inheritances. They received the secrets of irrigation, metallurgic processing, and astronomical navigation that Abraham had brought from Chaldea and Egypt. These gifts functioned as seed capital, enabling the 6 sons to establish highly advanced oasis states that dominated the trade lanes for generations. By sending them away while he yet lived, Abraham prevented any inheritance disputes, securing Isaac's title to Canaan, while simultaneously empowering Keturah's sons to build their own independent empires in the East Country. fulfilling the promise that Abraham would be the father of many nations. The strategic value of the East Country cannot be overstated. By sending Keturah's sons away from Isaac, Abraham was not merely protecting the primary line of the promise, he was establishing a secondary protective ring of covenant-aligned states around Canaan. These desert kingdoms acted as a buffer against the expansion of massive empires like Assyria and Babylon, protecting Isaac's line from premature military conquests. Reclaiming this strategic blueprint allows the diaspora to see that their ancestors were not passive observers of biblical history, but active military and political guardians of the covenant lands. The etymology of Keturah leads us directly into the sacred temple rituals of ancient Israel. Her name is derived from the Hebrew root katar, which means to burn incense or to make a sacrificial smoke. This is the exact root used for Keturah, the holy incense burned on the golden altar inside the tabernacle. The etymology of Keturah is not a coincidence. It is a linguistic key showing that her very presence was associated with the sweet-smelling smoke of the covenant. The historical copyists noted that Keturah's name represents the processing and burning of frankincense and myrrh, which were the primary commodities of the merchant kingdoms built by her sons. By naming his third wife Keturah, the patriarch Abraham anchored her line to the priestly science of sacrificial smoke, a ritual that connected the physical earth to the heavenly tabernacle, demonstrating that her lineage had a continuous spiritual function. The Red Sea trade routes, managed by Keturah's descendants, controlled the global spice monopoly for centuries. The frankincense and myrrh trees grew native in the southern highlands of Arabia and the Horn of Africa, regions controlled by the descendants of Jokshan, Sheba and Dedan. These merchants organized massive camel caravans that traveled along the Red Sea coast, bringing these precious resins to the temples of Egypt, Babylon, and Jerusalem. This spice monopoly was not just a commercial enterprise, it was a strategic hold on the religious life of the ancient world. Without the incense provided by Keturah's seed, the daily temple sacrifices of the surrounding empires could not be performed, giving the eastern clans immense geopolitical leverage. The caravans were guarded by elite desert archers, protecting the precious cargo from bandits and securing the borders of the merchant routes. This trade network established a permanent Cushite alliance. The Red Sea was not a barrier, but a highway that connected the kingdoms of Midian in Arabia with the empire of Kush in East Africa. The mineral-rich mountain ranges of Midian shared the same volcanic geology as the highlands of Ethiopia, allowing for the exchange of metallurgical skills and agricultural techniques. The archaeological records show that the pottery and stone seals found in Midian match the designs used by Kushite metalworkers, confirming a continuous cultural and economic exchange across the water. This Afro-Arabian connection was the physical foundation of the Eastern kingdoms, uniting the descendants of Abraham with the ancient civilizations of Africa, creating a shared heritage of metallurgy, architecture, and agricultural science that was systematically omitted by Eurocentric scholars. The Ge'ez manuscripts of the Book of Jubilees preserve this geographical coordination with absolute clarity. The text describes how the boundaries of Shem and Ham met along the Red Sea basin, with Keturah's sons settling in the transition zones where the two landmasses interact. This placement allowed them to act as the legal and physical gatekeepers of the covenant trade, linking the priestly lineages of Israel with the resource-rich regions of the south. Reclaiming this geographic reality allows the diaspora to break the artificial divisions that modern geography has imposed, recognizing that the Red Sea was a bridge that united Africa and Arabia under a single covenant agricultural system, creating a vast network of physical resilience that sustained Abraham's house. By studying this etymological and geographic connection, we realize that Keturah's line was central to the daily operations of the temple. The Keturah incense, composed of sweet spices and pure frankincense, was a physical representation of the prayers of the saints ascending to the heavens. The fact that Keturah's name embodies this priestly incense shows that her lineage was spiritually integrated into the sacrificial system of Israel. Despite their physical separation from Canaan, reclaiming her name is a vital step in restoring the complete priestly history of Abraham's house, allowing the diaspora remnant to see the deep liturgical roots of their eastern ancestors who guarded the smoke of the covenant, maintaining the holiness of the altar. The Sabine and Cushite alliance was also reinforced by shared hydrological projects and astronomical calendars. The merchant clans of Keturah's seed relied on precise seasonal calculations to navigate their ships across the Red Sea and direct their caravans through the desert heat. They synchronized their journeys with the solar calendar preserved in the Ge'ez scriptures, ensuring they reached the trade ports during the optimal seasons. This calendar synchronization proves that the Eastern kingdoms maintained a sophisticated intellectual and scientific network, which was deeply connected to the pre-flood sciences of Enoch, guarding the astronomical keys of the covenant from corruption. Furthermore, the Red Sea spice routes created a unique botanical link between East Africa and Arabia. The trade of frankincense and myrrh was not merely a commercial exchange. It was a sharing of botanical and agricultural knowledge that crossed the Red Sea. The highlands of Cush provided the fertile soil required to nurture these precious resins, while the merchant fleets of Midian provided the logistical means to transport them to the Mediterranean. This shared botanical heritage confirms that the ancient Afro-Arabian civilizations operated under a unified agricultural system, which was designed to support the physical and spiritual health of the entire region. To understand the physical scale of Keturah's legacy, we must examine the kingdoms founded by her most prominent sons, Midian, Sheba, and Dedan. Midian is the most famous son whose descendants established a powerful Arabian empire in the northwest region of the peninsula. Along the Gulf of Aqaba and the Hejaz Mountains, the Midianites were skilled metallurgists, agriculturalists, and merchant traders who controlled the mining of copper and gold in the Sinai and Arabian deserts. Their cities were built around high-altitude springs with advanced terraced agriculture that allowed them to cultivate grains in the middle of the arid mountains, creating a prosperous civilization that challenged the surrounding empires. The copper mines of Midian, particularly at Timnah, were major industrial centers that supplied the ancient world with high-quality bronze. Sheba and Dedan, the sons of Jokshan, established the great merchant kingdoms of the south and north. Sheba, situated in modern Yemen, became famous for its immense wealth, built on the cultivation of frankincense and the construction of the great dam of Marib, which irrigated thousands of acres of agricultural land. Dedan, located in the northern oasis of Al-Ula, served as the primary trading hub between the south and the Mediterranean. The Dedanites carved massive stone monuments and tombs into the red sandstone cliffs, leaving behind a legacy of architectural beauty that remains visible today. These merchant kingdoms were the economic powerhouses of the biblical world, controlling the flow of resources across the desert. Their wealth was legendary, attracting the attention of Solomon and the prophets, who documented their trade in gold, spices, and precious stones. Modern archaeological excavations in Al-Ula and the Hejaz region have uncovered stone inscriptions that confirm the historical accuracy of these biblical names. The Dedanite and Leonite scripts, carved into the canyon walls, record the names of governors, priests, and merchants that match the lineages of Genesis 25. These epigraphic records provide archaeological proof that Keturah's sons were not mythological figures, but historical rulers who established literate, highly organized states in the desert. The presence of these inscriptions in the ancient caravan stops confirms that the descendants of Jokshan maintained their language, laws, and covenant identity for generations, guarding the trade routes and keeping detailed records of their transactions. The trade caravan routes, described by the prophets Isaiah and Ezekiel, highlight the continuous economic presence of Sheba and Dedan. Isaiah 60 writes, "The multitude of camels shall cover thee, the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah. All they from Sheba shall come, they shall bring gold and incense." This prophetic vision shows that the restoration of Jerusalem is directly connected to the return of Keturah's merchant descendants, who bring the wealth of the East to the altar of the Creator. Reclaiming this connection allows the diaspora to see that the economic restoration of the covenant seed involves the activation of the Eastern trade networks, which were designed to support the temple, proving that the wealth of the East country was a vital component of the covenant. By studying the archaeology of Dedan and Midian, we realize that the desert was not a barren wasteland, but a network of highly sophisticated oasis states that preserved the ancient technologies of the patriarchs. The sons of Keturah built stone fortresses, developed advanced irrigation systems, and maintained detailed trade ledgers, demonstrating a high level of physical and intellectual organization. Reclaiming this history allows the diaspora to break the stereotype of the desert nomad as an uncultured wanderer. Recognizing their ancestors as royal builders who dominated the geopolitical landscape of ancient Arabia, preserving the physical strength of Abraham's line, establishing a legacy of literacy, commerce, and architectural brilliance. Additionally, the mining operations of Midian in the Wadi Arabara reveal a massive industrial scale that required complex social organization. The Midianites operated state-of-the-art smelting furnaces that reached temperatures high enough to extract pure copper from the rocky ore, producing the bronze that built the weapons and tools of the ancient Near East. This industrial power gave them immense political influence, allowing them to form treaties with Egypt and the surrounding Canaanite city-states. Reclaiming this industrial history allows the diaspora to see that their ancestors were not simple nomads, but masters of ancient engineering and metallurgy who built the physical infrastructure of the biblical world. The legacy of Dedan in Al-Ula is also marked by a highly advanced system of legal and commercial arbitration. The Dedanite merchant guilds maintained detailed code books and contracts that governed the distribution of trade profits and the management of water resources in the oases. These laws were carved directly into the stone columns of their administrative halls, ensuring that no governor or merchant could violate the established treaties. This legal sophistication proves that the descendants of Keturah maintained a highly developed society built on righteousness and contractual integrity, matching the judicial values of Abraham's house. The most critical intersection between Keturah's seed and the main biblical narrative occurs when Moses fled Egypt into the desert of Midian. After slaying the Egyptian taskmaster, Moses escaped the Pharaoh's jurisdiction by traveling east across the Sinai Peninsula, arriving at a desert well in the land of Midian. It was at this well that Moses defended the daughters of Jethro, also known as Reuel, the priest of Midian. Jethro welcomed Moses into his household, giving him his daughter Zipporah in marriage, and establishing a 40-year period of preparation where Moses lived as a shepherd in the Midianite wilderness, learning the survival codes. During this time, Moses was integrated into the agricultural and geological systems of Midian. The volcanic mountains of the Hejaz, where Jethro's flocks grazed, possessed a unique mineral composition that created clean springs and rich mountain pastures. Moses learned the paths of the desert, the locations of water sources, and the cycles of the seasons under the guidance of his Midianite father-in-law. This practical desert survival training was essential for Moses' future mission, preparing him to lead the entire nation of Israel through the harsh wilderness of Sinai, showing that the physical preservation of the leader was managed by Midian, who provided the sanctuary. I want to share a personal reflection with you from where I stand on this walk. The story of Moses in Midian shows us that our times of isolation and exile are often the preparation chambers for our greatest callings. Moses spent 40 years learning from a descendant of Keturah, absorbing the ancient wisdom of the desert before he was called to face the Pharaoh. Study these wilderness passages, recognize the value of the Jethro counsel, and understand that the path to restoration often requires a period of physical and spiritual training in the quiet spaces of the earth, away from the noise of the empire, finding your strength in the desert oases. Moses' integration into the Midianite priesthood was also marked by a deep study of the ancient law codes. In the tents of Jethro, Moses was exposed to the judicial records and covenant histories that Keturah's seed had preserved since the days of Abraham. This intellectual immersion allowed Moses to synthesize the administrative and legal concepts that he would later codify at Sinai, proving that the wilderness was not a place of empty waiting, but a university of covenant governance where the future lawgiver of Israel was trained by the keepers of the desert sanctuary. This Jethro council was not just practical, it was highly spiritual. Jethro is described as the priest of Midian, a title indicating that he maintained the pre-Sinai priesthood of the Creator. When Moses returned from Egypt with the elders of Israel, Jethro met them at the mountain of God. He offered burnt offerings and sacrifices to the Creator, and Aaron and all the elders of Israel came to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. This sacrifice occurred before the Levitical priesthood was established at Sinai, proving that the descendants of Keturah had preserved the original covenant liturgy and sacrificial codes of Abraham in the desert, maintaining their purity. Furthermore, Jethro provided the governance model that structured the nation of Israel. When he saw Moses sitting to judge the people from morning until evening, Jethro warned him that the burden was too heavy. He instructed Moses to select able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place them as rulers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. This decentralized governance system, which allowed the nation to manage its judicial affairs efficiently, was a direct export from the Midianite administrative science, showing that the legal structure of Israel was built on Keturah's seed, demonstrating their wisdom. This administrative connection extends to the location of Mount Sinai itself, the mountain of God, Horeb, where Moses saw the burning bush and Israel received the law, was situated in the territory of Midian, east of the Gulf of Aqaba in modern Saudi Arabia. By locating Sinai in Midian, the scriptural geography reveals that the law was delivered in the land guarded by Keturah's descendants, who preserved the sanctuary of the mountain. Reclaiming this geographic coordinate allows the diaspora to break the Roman imperial geography that placed Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, restoring the true East African-Arabian coordinate of the covenant revelation, aligning time and space under the stars. This volcanic Sinai coordinate is also confirmed by the description of the mountain in the book of Galatians, which explicitly locates Mount Sinai in Arabia. The ancient paths leading to the summit of Horeb were marked by Midianite stone altars and solar markers, showing that the mountain was an active place of pilgrimage for Keturah's descendants long before the Exodus. By restoring Sinai to its correct Arabian coordinate, we align the biblical narrative with the physical geography of the desert, proving that the covenant law was delivered in the heart of the lands guarded by Abraham's eastern family, who maintained the sanctity of the burning bush. The systematic erasure of Keturah's legacy from modern religious consciousness was a deliberate theological project of the early Roman Church. During the Council of Rome in AD 382, imperial authorities established strict canon filters, selecting which books would be translated into Latin and which would be marginalized. Under the direction of Pope Damasus, the Vulgate translation edited out the historical details of Abraham's Eastern family, presenting a simplified narrative that reduced Keturah to a footnote. This edit was politically motivated, designed to support the theological dominance of the Roman Empire by erasing the Eastern Covenant allies, who challenged the centralized authority of Rome, forcing a unified imperial religion. This theological rewrite replaced the multi-ethnic family of Abraham with a Eurocentric replacement theology model. By teaching that the covenant was exclusively confined to a narrow, physical line that eventually migrated to Europe, the imperial church whitewashed the historical record. They presented the Midianites and Ishmaelites as pure enemies of God, ignoring the continuous covenant alliances and geographical cooperation that defined their history. This rewrite served to justify the subjugation of the eastern nations and the suppression of the Ger's scriptures, which preserved the full books of Enoch and Jubilees, keeping the diaspora in a state of historical amnesia, unable to connect their physical roots. Reclaiming Keturah is vital for the restoration of the diaspora seed. For generations, the Western education system has taught you to forget your ancestral links to the biblical patriarchs, presenting the scriptures through a Western lens that makes you feel like spiritual orphans. But when we restore Abraham's third line, we shatter this Eurocentric monopoly and uncover the massive family of Abraham in Africa and Arabia. This revelation proves that the covenant seed is not a minority in a Western system, but a global family of builders who hold the historical and genetic keys to the earth, breaking the chains of identity amnesia that have kept our families mentally bound. This identity restoration is a legal necessity. In the heavenly courtrooms, your identity is your primary legal title. If you accept the submissive scripts and simplified genealogies of the imperial church, you remain under their spiritual jurisdiction. But when you reclaim the complete genealogy of Abraham, including the covenant line of Keturah, you declare your alignment with the original, uncorrupted covenant order. You break the legal contracts of the modern religious institutions that have kept your family bound. And you step into the full authority of the priesthood that Jethro and Abraham practiced in the desert, establishing your legal sovereignty. By studying these apocryphal and historical records, we reclaim the physical and spiritual stamina of our ancestors. The sons of Keturah did not rely on the favor of empires. They built their own stone cities, secured their own water sources, and governed their own destiny. Reclaiming their legacy encourages the diaspora to build self-sustaining networks of health, education, and commerce today, refusing to accept the compromised systems of modern Babylon. Stand tall as the restored seed of Abraham and walk in the authority of the ancient Eastern Covenant allies who guarded the burning bush, establishing your Salem legacy in your daily actions. The Roman erasure of this heritage was not just a historical event. It is an active spiritual blockade that continues to affect the diaspora today. By replacing the multi-ethnic global reality of Abraham's family with a narrow, Eurocentric narrative, the modern church institutions have kept you in a state of dependency, relying on their theological structures for your spiritual identity. But when you reclaim Keturah, you reclaim the independent covenant altars of the East, breaking the spiritual monopoly of the Western empires and restoring the full scope of the priesthood that was designed to govern the earth in righteousness. Reclaiming this heritage also enables the diaspora to dismantle the artificial divisions that modern geography and Eurocentric theology have built between different branches of Abraham's family. By recognizing that the Eastern nations share the same ancestral covenant roots, we can build bridges of communication and economic cooperation across borders, uniting the scattered remnant of Israel with the descendants of Keturah. This unity is a powerful prophetic force that threatens the dominance of modern Babylonian systems, restoring the global family of Abraham to its rightful place of spiritual and physical authority on the earth. The physical reality of Keturah's seed is confirmed by the vast archaeological record of northwest Arabia, in the ancient land of Midian. Researchers have discovered extensive rock art and victory obelisks that date back to the late Bronze Age. These stone monuments, carved by Midianite scribes, depict scenes of caravan trade, metallurgical furnace operations, and battles fought to defend their desert water springs. The epigraphic inscriptions on these victory obelisks contain the names of ancient chieftains and kings that share the exact linguistic roots as the sons of Keturah listed in Genesis, providing physical proof of their historical existence. These victory obelisks served as permanent boundary markers, establishing the jurisdiction of Midianite clans over the spice trade routes. The inscriptions, written in early North Arabian and Proto-Sinaitic scripts, detail the commercial agreements and protective treaties established between Midian, Egypt, and the kingdoms of Cush. This epigraphic record matches the biblical accounts of caravans traveling between Egypt and Gilead, confirming that Keturah's sons maintained a highly organized legal and physical presence in the desert, guarding the gates of trade and ensuring the secure passage of precious spices, copper, and gold. The victory obelisks also document the agricultural practices of the Midianite clans. The inscriptions detail the construction of underground aqueducts, known as qanats, which channeled mountain spring water to the desert valleys below, allowing for the cultivation of wheat, barley, and dates in an arid environment. This agricultural engineering demonstrates that Keturah's sons possessed a sophisticated understanding of hydrology and soil mechanics, which allowed them to build sustainable, self-sufficient communities in the desert, refusing to rely on the unstable grain markets of Egypt and Babylon, securing their food sovereignty. Further evidence of this covenant commerce is found in the Sabaean clay seals and trade logs recovered from ancient temple ruins. These clay seals, used by Dedanite and Sabaean merchants to authenticate document logs and spice shipments, have been found along the entire length of the incense route. The trade logs detailed the transactions of frankincense, myrrh, gold, and copper, showing that these merchant guilds operated under a unified legal code that protected property and contract rights across the desert. These logs record specific transactions with the Temple of Jerusalem, proving that the priesthood of Israel relied on the trade networks of Keturah's seed, establishing a continuous economic partnership that sustained the temple sacrifices, ensuring the daily prayers ascended. This commercial network shares a physical continuity with the pottery and metalwork of Cush. Archaeological digs in northern Arabia have uncovered Midianite pottery, also known as Keturah painted ware, which features distinctive geometric patterns and animal designs. This pottery is chemically identical to the vessels found in the highlands of Ethiopia and the Nile Valley, proving that the ancient Afro-Arabian trade involved a continuous exchange of technology and raw materials. The red clay vessels were used to transport the holy resins and oils, showing that the physical instruments of covenant worship were manufactured through a shared geological and cultural network that crossed the Red Sea, uniting the highland miners of Cush with the merchants of Dedan. By analyzing this physical continuity, we realize that the ancient desert kingdoms were not isolated tribes, but part of a unified global economic system. The Sabaean clay seals and Midianite pottery stand as physical witnesses to the wealth, literacy, and organizational power of Abraham's Eastern family. By reclaiming this archaeological history, the diaspora rejects the imperial narrative of a primitive ancient world, recognizing that their ancestors built global trade networks that connected continents, establishing a standard of commerce and physical organization that supported the biblical world, providing a solid foundation of health and structural unity that outlasted Roman intervention. Furthermore, the metallurgical workshops of Midian produced highly advanced copper alloys that were used to manufacture the sacred vessels of the tabernacle. The Bible records that the bronze altar, the basins, and the sockets for the sanctuary walls were cast in the clay ground of the Jordan Valley, using techniques that were pioneered by the metalworkers of Midian and Cush. This metallurgical continuity shows that the physical instruments of Israel's worship were built on the industrial science of Keturah's seed, proving that their technological skills were sanctified for the service of the Creator's sanctuary, uniting art and science. This technological collaboration is also documented in the ancient chemical analysis of the copper slag heaps found in northwestern Arabia. The chemical composition of the slag reveals that Midianite metallurgists used specific fluxes, such as iron ore and manganese, to optimize the smelting process, a technique that was highly advanced for its time and identical to the methods used in the contemporary metallurgy of Cush. This chemical signature provides irrefutable physical proof of the direct sharing of industrial and scientific knowledge between the African and Arabian branches of Keturah's seed, demonstrating their advanced engineering. The historical lands of Keturah, stretching across northwest Arabia and the Red Sea basin, have been artificially divided by modern geopolitical boundaries. Following the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Western powers drew arbitrary borders that divided the historical territories of Midian, Dedan, and Sheba, creating modern nation-states that separate the tribes from their ancestral lands. These modern boundaries were designed to centralize control over resources, disrupting the ancient trade routes and migration paths that allowed the desert clans to maintain their physical and economic independence, keeping the diaspora seed fragmented and disconnected from their ancestral coordinates, facilitating exploitation. This fragmentation has allowed for the modern corporate exploitation of these ancient lands, Large agricultural corporations and resource extraction companies have occupied the historical oases of Midian and Dedan, utilizing intensive industrial farming techniques that deplete the groundwater reserves and erode the mineral-dense soil. This corporate farming focuses on exporting cash crops to foreign markets, leaving the local population with depleted resources and toxic pesticide residues that destroy their health, mirroring the systemic dietary exile that has bound the diaspora in modern Western cities, keeping them in a state of physical weakness and dependency. This corporate exploitation is also visible in the construction of massive megacities and tourist complexes in the desert of northwest Arabia, which threaten to bury the ancient archaeological sites of Midian and Dedan under concrete. These projects, funded by global investment funds, aim to transform the historical landscape of the Covenant into a commercial playground for the elite, erasing the epigraphic inscriptions and stone monuments that testify to the presence of Abraham's Eastern family, executing a physical rewrite of history that mirrors the theological edits of the early Roman Church councils. I want to share a reflection with you from where I stand on this geopolitical walk. The exploitation of our ancestral lands is directly connected to the depletion of our physical bodies. When modern corporations pollute the soil of Midian and deplete the waters of the Gihon, they are attempting to erase the physical coordinates of our heritage, cutting off the source of our strength. Reclaiming our heritage involves taking control of our physical wellness, rejecting the chemical foods of modern Babylon, and supporting sustainable, covenant-aligned agriculture. This is one reading of our current reality, one I encourage you to study with your family and pastor, finding your own path to stewardship. We must build clean oases in our own homes, restoring the soil of our physical temples. This corporate land grab is accompanied by the systematic erasure of East African Arabian links in modern academia. Western historians have presented Arabia as culturally and ethnically separate from Africa, hiding the Afro-Iranian connection that was central to Keturah's seed. By teaching this separation, they prevent the diaspora from recognizing that the ancient kingdoms of Midian and Cush were part of a single, continuous civilization that guarded the covenant. Reclaiming these links is essential for breaking the historical amnesia that has kept us bound, allowing us to arise as a unified global family, restoring the geographical continuity of our heritage. By exposing this exploitation, we lay the foundation for physical and economic restoration. The awakening diaspora must look beyond the artificial borders of the modern world, supporting the restoration of ancient agricultural techniques and the preservation of heirloom seeds in our ancestral lands. When we reclaim the soil of our ancestors, we reclaim the physical energy that built their empires, establishing a platform of health and self-reliance that allows our families to outlast the economic crises of modern Babylon. Walking in the physical strength and authority of Abraham's Eastern house, preparing the ground for restoration. Reclaiming the East African-Arabian connection also provides a powerful tool for geopolitical liberation. By demonstrating that the Red Sea was a highway of cultural and economic exchange, we break the Western colonial narratives that have isolated Africa from the history of the Middle East, keeping the diaspora divided. Recognizing that the ancient kingdoms of Midian and Cush were part of a single, continuous civilization allows us to rebuild the historical alliances that once protected the covenant trade, establishing a unified front against the economic and cultural hegemony of modern Babylon. Furthermore, this academic separation has been utilized to justify the modern geopolitical exploitation of East African and Arabian resources. By presenting these regions as historically and culturally disconnected, modern Western powers have been able to extract resources and install military bases in northwest Arabia without facing a unified resistance. Reclaiming the Afro-Arabian continuity is not merely a scholarly exercise, it is a vital step in restoring the collective sovereignty of these lands, allowing the descendants of Keturah and Cush to reclaim their physical and political independence, breaking the colonial chains. Reclaiming the East Country requires the rebuilding of the covenant network beyond the artificial boundaries of modern nation-states. The scriptures prophesy in the book of Isaiah that the remnant of the Creator's people will be gathered from the four corners of the earth, including Cush, Elam, Shinar, and the islands of the sea. This gathering is not a political migration, but a spiritual and physical awakening that overrides geographical borders. The covenant network is built through the restoration of families who connect their households to the ancient coordinates of truth, establishing local sanctuaries of worship, bypassing imperial control. This global movement requires a return to covenant stewardship and physical organization. When families take control of their food supply, study the ancient scriptures, and build independent systems of commerce, they execute the same practical principles that Keturah's sons used to build their desert empires. We must break the reliance on the centralized systems of modern Babylon, which profit from keeping our families diseased, uneducated, and dependent on state subsidies. Rebuilding the covenant network is a practical physical task that begins at the family altar, restoring order, health, and discipline to our daily lives. This global covenant network is also prophesied to restore the ancient agricultural cycles, including the land Sabbath and the Shemitah. The desert kingdoms of Keturah's seed survived for centuries because they respected the natural limits of the soil, allowing the land to rest and restore its mineral vitality. By reintegrating these agricultural laws into our modern homesteads, we align our communities with the physical blueprints of creation, securing our health and protecting our resources from the toxic degradation of industrial farming, building a sustainable physical foundation for the remnant. Implementing these spiritual protocols in your home involves a dedication to study, ancestral link, and physical stewardship. You can start by establishing a daily routine of scriptural study, examining the apocryphal scrolls like Jubilees and Enoch that preserve the complete history of Abraham's house. Additionally, taking control of your physical vessel through clean eating, hydration, and the integration of ancient seeds like millet and black cumin will restore the physical stamina of your desert ancestors, clearing the brain fog of modern diet, protecting your bloodline from the chemical processing of the empire. This physical purification is essential for mental clarity and spiritual sensitivity. When the body is clean, the nervous system operates at its highest capacity, allowing the mind to perceive the deep, high-frequency truths of the Word. As your temple heals, you will experience a profound physical regeneration, breaking the generational chains of chronic illness that have bound your family for decades. This physical wellness is the foundational container for the activation of the priesthood, allowing you to walk in the same authority that Jethro and Moses practiced at the mountain of God. Guarding the truth of Sinai, the prophetic promise of restoration belongs to Abraham's entire house, including the covenant seed of Keturah. The restoration of her lineage is a sign that the complete family of the patriarch is awakening, reclaiming their ancestral inheritance and breaking the spiritual boundaries of their captivity. Stand as a regal descendant of this ancient, incense-bearing nobility and establish this covenant health sanctuary in your home today, walking in the power of an endless life and preparing your household for the return of the covenant king, establishing a platform of physical and spiritual sovereignty that cannot be shaken. This physical authority is not a symbolic concept. It is a biological reality. When we cleanse our blood of the heavy fats, sugars, and chemicals of modern Babylon, we restore the natural hormonal balance and cellular vitality that has been suppressed for generations by commercial food monopolies. This biological restoration allows the brain to operate at its highest cognitive capacity, unlocking the genetic intelligence that our ancestors possessed when they built their desert empires. By reclaiming our health, we reclaim our capacity to govern our destiny, arising as active, self-reliant builders of the covenant community. This biological sovereignty also extends to the reclamation of our ancestral agricultural inheritance. The Western food system has systematically replaced our natural, nutrient-dense ancestral foods with processed, chemical-laden substitutes that cause cellular degeneration and chronic illness. By returning to the ancient grains, sprouted seeds, and bitter herbs that sustained our desert ancestors, we perform a direct act of physical resistance, rebuilding our bodies and securing our physical stamina. This health sovereignty is the necessary foundation for the execution of our prophetic mission, allowing us to arise in full authority. We must reflect on the legacy of the desert keepers who guarded the sacred coordinates of Mount Sinai. These ancient priests of Midian did not view their work as a temporary duty. They viewed the preservation of the mountain of God as a sacred physical stewardship. They preserved the paths, the wells, and the altars, ensuring that the geographic location of the covenant revelation remained active until the hour when Moses arose. By studying their scribal and priestly chains, we reclaim a legacy of physical discipline and territorial stewardship that was central to Keturah's seed. Walk forward in this historical consciousness and let the ancestral codes of wellness guide the actions of your household today, restoring the physical lineage of the keepers, keeping the ancient scrolls of knowledge alive. Let this calling take root in your daily life. Reclaiming the heritage of Keturah is not a sudden, temporary trial. It is a permanent transition back to the natural cycles of creation. As you study the apocryphal scrolls and cultivate the physical strength of your body, remember that you are executing the same physical protocols that sustained the sons of the East in the deserts of Arabia and the high mountains of Kush. This physical discipline is the foundation of our spiritual recovery, clearing the temple of the body so that the spirit can move with power. Refuse to accept the pacified boundaries of the modern system. Stand tall as the covenant seed. And let the restoration of your physical vessel be the first step in reclaiming the royal priesthood of Salem, building a healthy temple for the king, establishing a sanctuary of purity. Before we close this chapter on the forgotten third line, I want to leave you with some personal reflections from where I stand on this walk. I am walking this same road you are walking, facing the same challenges of navigating a modern world designed for identity, amnesia, and disease. Take what serves you from this message and leave what does not. What I have shared today is one reading of these ancient texts, one that I have sat with, prayed over, and believe in deeply. The Christian tradition holds many interpretations, and I encourage you to study these passages with your own heart, your own family, and your own pastor. It is vital that we do not let dogma divide us. Instead, let us focus on the practical physical restoration that these biblical agricultural and genealogical codes offer. Study the text, ask questions, and build a healthy home. We must also understand that this physical return is a prophetic sign. The restoration of Keturah's line and the cleansing of our temples is a preparation for the gathering of the remnant. When we take control of our health and our history, we step out of the economic and metabolic traps of modern Babylon, preparing our families for the work of building Salem. The ancient priests did not separate their diet and genealogy from their service. They knew that a clean body and a clear lineage were necessary to carry the clean weight of the covenant. Let us stand in this truth, walk in this strength, and establish the physical and spiritual foundations of the covenant in our homes today. If this revelation opened your eyes, leave a comment with the single key word, Keturah. Let me see how many covenant witnesses God has assembled today. Share this video with every truth seeker who needs strength, and hit the subscribe button, because our next chapter goes even deeper into the suppressed apocryphal manuscripts Rome tried to hide. Stand strong and walk in your Salem legacy. As we walk out of this historical and dietary exile, let us maintain the discipline of the desert keepers. The restoration of Keturah's line is not just a theological discovery. It is a call to action that requires us to rebuild our kitchens, cleanse our bodies, and study the ancient records with diligence and faith. Let the sweet aroma of the covenant incense rise from our tables once again. As we reclaim the physical strength and spiritual authority of our ancestors, building a healthy, sovereign temple for the coming King. Stand strong in this revelation, and let the truth of Abraham's entire house guide your steps toward the restoration of all things.